Welcome to the Roman Forum. The year is something like 100 AD, the sun is shining, and the empire is at its peak. You're looking for a new toga, maybe some fresh fish for dinner, and you think, hey, why not swing by the human market? Because that was just a thing. Right there, between the bronze statues and the bustling bakeries, was the ultimate impulse buy. It was a bizarre, brutal, and entirely normal part of daily life. The question isn't what was a person worth, but rather, how many loaves of bread or what percentage of a legionary's salary would it take to buy your own personal assistant, chef, philosopher? The answer is a wild, often hilarious look into the price list of an empire that treated people like commodities. So, you're a Roman on a budget. Maybe you just got a sweet inheritance or a promotion at the aqueduct department. You head to the market for your first slave. What's the damage? Well, for an average, unskilled person, the price was around 2,000 sesterces. Let's put that into perspective with a classic Roman worker, the foot soldier. The tough-as-nails legionary, the literal backbone of the empire, made a whopping 900 sesterces a year. After deductions for things like boots, hay, and presumably very tiny helmets for their pet squirrels, they were left with a measly 600 sesterces. So, your average human being cost more than 3 years of a soldier's take-home pay. That's like the Roman equivalent of a new chariot, a major investment that you definitely don't want to mess up. A master's logic wasn't be kind, it was protect the investment. Brutal beatings. A bad idea. Why? Because it could impair your brand new, very expensive human asset. The system was run by an HR department that thought in terms of return on investment, not humanity. The 2000 cestus base model was just for amateurs. True Roman wealth was about a different kind of flex, collecting the rare, exotic, and highly specialized. This was the ancient world's version of microtransactions, where you could upgrade your life with a special skill set. Want a vineyard worker? That'll be 6,000 to 8,000 sesterces, which is basically the price of a small house. But if you wanted to go full Roman baller, you went for the truly ridiculous. A slave who happened to be good at speaking Greek. A cool 2,000 denarii, which is about 8,000 sesterces. That's a lot of denarii for a personal translator. The gladiator market was even more insane. An owner could get between 1,000 to 15,000 sesterces for a single fighter, making a top-tier warrior worth the equivalent of a vinedresser's entire career. But the all-time undisputed champion of ridiculous human price tags was a grammar teacher. One poor fellow named Lutatius Daphnis was sold for an absolutely insane 175,000 denarii. That's enough to make a senator blush. This guy wasn't just a teacher. He was a walking, talking, human-sized GME stock. His life was in a completely different universe than that of the poor soul toiling in a mine, a short and miserable existence defined by chains and back-breaking work. The most valuable slaves could even buy their own freedom, which was a brilliant strategic move by masters to motivate their workforce. Hey, you can be free. Just, do all my work perfectly for a few decades. To really feel the absurdity, you have to compare the price of a human being to the cost of other things in Rome. A common laborer earned about 1 denarius a day. You could buy a basic 1 pound loaf of bread for about a half sestertius, which is about 1/8 of a denarius. An average slave was 500 denarii, which means you could buy roughly 4,000 loaves of bread for the price of a single human being. But wait, there's more. A cow would run you about 100 to 200 denarii. You could get 2 to 5 cows for one person. A racehorse. A steal at 100,000 denarii. A senator might own an entire stable of these and then complain about the cost of hay. The price list from Diocletian's Edict of Maximum Prices lists a first-class lion for 150,000 denarii. And for the truly absurd, ancient sources note that some rich people would spend more on a single large fish for a dinner party than on a poor slave. Owning people wasn't just about labor. It was a living, breathing status symbol. The more you had, the more specialized and exotic they were, the cooler you were. It was a brutal form of one-upmanship, where you could show off your wealth by literally owning other people, right alongside your racehorses and your lions. How did Rome stock its human capital? It was an epic, and frankly, disturbing, process. In the good old days of the Republic, The main source of new inventory was military conquest. You win a war, you get a new province, and you get a massive, discounted influx of human beings. It was like a Black Friday sale for the victorious army. As the empire got lazy and stopped conquering everyone, the supply chain had to get more creative. Piracy and kidnapping became a reliable source, with places like Cilicia becoming notorious for preying on anyone with a pulse. But the most chilling and efficient part of the system was reproduction. Children born to enslaved mothers were the automatic property of the master from the moment they were born. It was a subscription service the masters never had to renew. And in a final, heartbreaking twist, desperate citizens would sometimes sell themselves or their children into servitude just to escape debt or starvation. It shows how slavery wasn't just a brutal footnote of history, but a deep, self-perpetuating system that adapted to survive. The legal status of a Roman slave was brutal and unequivocal. They were res, an object or property. This meant they had no rights. They couldn't own property, get married, or even sign a contract. Their masters held the power of life and death over them, and killing a slave carried no legal consequence. The punishments were so extreme that they were reserved exclusively for the enslaved. However, life varied wildly. If you were a field hand, your life was short, miserable, and often spent in chains. If you were a household slave, life was better, with more autonomy and slightly less brutality. The Roman Senate once considered a brilliant idea to make all slaves wear a uniform. It was quickly rejected because they realized something terrifying. If the slaves saw how many of them there were, they would probably all get together and rebel. This is the ancient world's funniest, most accurate fear of a flash mob. It also proves that Roman slavery was not based on race. Slaves were so ubiquitous they were virtually invisible, doing every job from running aqueducts to managing businesses. For the masters, slave ownership was a cold, calculated business. The most effective management technique wasn't the whip but the promise of freedom and citizenship. This was the ultimate hack. The prospect of manumission was a more effective way to get loyalty and hard work than any form of punishment. For the elite, a huge retinue of enslaved people was a status symbol, a giant, human-shaped billboard that screamed, "I am ridiculously wealthy." But the whole system came crashing down in the most epic way possible with the Third Servile War, led by the gladiator Spartacus. His rebellion, which swelled to an army of over 100,000 people, was a total system meltdown. While the rebellion was eventually crushed with 6,000 crucified along the Appian Way, it was a powerful wake-up call. It was a brutal reminder that for all the economic logic and strategic carrots, an empire built on the backs of other people was always just one rebellion away from collapse. So, what was the cost of a slave? It wasn't just a number. It was a bizarre, cruel, and complex calculation that valued human skill and social status right alongside a senator's prize lion. It's a powerful, and occasionally hilarious, reminder of a society that was so deeply rooted in the concept of human property that it had to invent new ways to protect, manage, and display its most disturbing assets.